Welcome everyone to the L7C podcast here. This time we're doing the Hoops edition with my main man, Evan Debo. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, Martin. How are you? I'm excited to talk first round hoops and all things second round here as we analyze from the bubble.
Absolutely. For those of you who may not know, me and Evan both love the NBA. We both watch any game that we could possibly get, especially with our crazy works and the schedules that we run because of our jobs. Sometimes we miss games, but we're always talking about it the next day after. But like Evan said, we're going to talk about the first round, preview some of the second round, and talk about some of the games that have already happened. So first, we're going to talk about the Western Conference. We're going to talk about round one. The Lakers over the Blazers. Lakers won 4-1. What did you think about the series?
So obviously Portland got that game snuck out in there, but I mean, it was kind of what we thought it was going to be with the powerhouse of Anthony Davis and LeBron. So I mean, I think the supporting cast and how that holds up for the Lakers is yet to be seen. But obviously it was just too much for Portland to handle, despite some really good performances, obviously from Dame carrying over from the 8 games in the bubble until obviously the dislocated finger and having to not play in that final game, and a really good resilient series cap despite the loss for Carmelo Anthony. I mean, who was dead in the water. Guy in the final game dropped, without Dame and obviously picking up some of the shots, dropped 27 points and.
Right.
Doing the get the F out of here rebounds and pulled in 7 there too. So I mean it was good. McCollum, just as easy as a bucket as you're going to find too. I mean, he had 36 I think in that final game, but it was like a leap this year despite a first round exit to the Lakers. Lakers have a tough road ahead, and we'll see what it comes from the supporting cast. What do you think about it?
I think with Portland, they were not the typical 8th seed. I mean, they were riddled with injuries pre-bubble. I think if they were fully healthy, they could have been a 4th or 5th seed in the West. So I actually think it was a very good test for the Lakers because, like you've already stated, they have a long road ahead, and to get a tough team right off the bat to test their resiliency was a good thing for them for their championship aspirations. Game 1, I mean, the Blazers got them. The Lakers weren't making any threes, but then since that game 1, they had no answer for Anthony Davis, especially when Collins got hurt. They just had no answer for him, and LeBron's going to be LeBron. I mean, we've been watching him since 2003. So, and then once the supporting cast made threes, it's just Portland didn't have enough firepower to deal with them. I completely agree with you on Carmelo Anthony. I think this bubble and this playoff run showed that he could still play in the league. He might not be in the prime of his career, but he can definitely contribute to any team. And then Dame, the bubble showed the league that he is definitely one of the top 2 or 3 point guards in all the NBA. For anyone who's doubted that, I don't think they can doubt that anymore, seeing the work that he put in this bubble. And for the Blazers going forward, I do think it's a bounce back. I know they lost in the first round to LA, but if they can keep people healthy and maybe get a piece or two, they could be in contention for maybe a Western Conference Finals down the line.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for the Blazers too, I mean, at the top of my list I had stop playing Mario Hezonja. I mean, that guy is just bad. Obviously he one of the kind of any NBA journeyman now, just in terms of relief bench scoring, but they brought him in to be that kind of 3-point sniper, and just really, really did not get much out of him in the series or the bubble or the latter half of the year. Obviously had some promise there when he in Orlando before he came there. But let me ask you this real quick before we move on to the next one.
Yep.
Obviously, I think both sides are happy with how things turned out. I mean, Carmelo signed a non-guaranteed deal to play here and way outperformed his pay, in a kind of show me what you got kind of contract opportunity. I think both sides are going to move, like a 2-year deal with a player option or something like that to keep Carmelo there. But is there any wild card you see? I mean, looking around the rest of the NBA of like somebody who could pony up and say, you know what, give me that Melo I saw in Portland. We think we can use him a little bit differently. what have you. I mean, do you think there's any outside shot somebody comes in and picks them up? I mean, especially when guards are almost a dime a dozen. Every team almost has a star guard, but wing help is certainly needed. Obviously, Carmelo can't get up and down the floor anymore, especially like he used to, or defensively, there's not much there. But a reliable wing who can go out and get you anywhere from 15 to 30 a night. I mean, what do you think?
I actually think two of the teams that first come to mind, which we're going to talk about later, is actually Milwaukee and Miami.
I like it.
I could see, well, depending on how that series goes, I could see.
Yeah, don't spoil it. We got a lot to talk about there.
I could see one of them really benefiting from getting a Carmelo to come off the bench. I mean, Milwaukee, if that's a person who they got to guard, like if he's on Milwaukee, they got to guard, the other team has to guard him. So Giannis could still drive, Melo can get his own shot. And then if he's on Miami, I mean, I think he'd fit in well with Jimmy Butler, the Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra system, because they got a lot of good young talent over there. And if you had a veteran like Melo, Miami could really do something next year. But they might do something this year. So
yeah, I mean, I'll give you a fit that just depending on how the offseason stuff shakes out. Granted, again, I think he's staying in Portland, but a team that stands out that's super super interesting to me. A couple teams. One would be the Dallas Mavericks, who are desperate need of some perimeter scoring, as we'll get into in a second with how the Mavericks series ended. To added bucket getters around Luka. I mean, as you can see, when you only have one or two stars, that can go and produce, teams really lock in defensively on the playoffs, and just having an extra guy who can create for himself. I think Dallas would be an interesting shot there. The other one that came to mind was, obviously Philadelphia. Philadelphia needs to figure out some different things. Tobias Harris, yes, plays at wing there, but they're going to have to figure something out with. They had some production out of Al Horford there, and we'll touch base on that in a second. But when they had him off the bench, so if you go with kind of a small 1 through 4 with Embiid at the 5. I think there's something there. Obviously, Melo will not go to the bench. He's made that clear. I mean, you just look around. It's just hard to believe that, whether it's Houston or whether it's OKC, neither of those guys could figure out the Melo thing like Portland did. So with that being said, I think it's a good situation. He's going to stick there. So speaking of OKC and Houston, we had in our show notes from yesterday, obviously we were assuming Houston was going to go through, and then Paul had other ideas last night as they beat the Rockets 104-100. We're taping this on Tuesday, September 1st. So as you're listening, this will be later in the week, and we'll know the result there. But what did you see yesterday in the box score? What did you see yesterday in that performance from Danilo, who came out really hot? 25 points in the game, came out with 8 quick points, I think, in the first quarter. Obviously, Chris Paul. And who do you see taking that series?
Full disclosure on the OKC team, when they got into the playoffs, me personally, Chris Paul was my MVP. The fact that he got traded there, almost like no man's land, and that he was able to.
Oh yeah, he was left for dead,
and he was able to lead that young team to a 6th seed, and it's unbelievable. Like he would have been my MVP vote. I know obviously he's not going to be the MVP, but I felt like he should have got a lot more consideration. I mean, this OKC team, the word I think about is tough. They're just tough. Like they're resilient. They don't give up. The biggest things I saw in the box score, not even the box score, the last 7 minutes of the fourth quarter, Chris Paul was hitting big threes after big threes, making the right reads on passes. Dennis Schroeder, he was unafraid going to the hole. And Russell Westbrook from OKC, he just had too many turnovers late. I don't understand how they didn't get the ball to James Harden on any of the possessions. And I felt like that could have potentially shifted momentum in the series. And OKC might take it. And then they got to hit the nuclear button if OKC wins the series on Houston's part.
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up a good point. I mean, how James doesn't have the ball in his hand. That obviously hindsight's 2020, but it may well the nail in the coffin if James has the final shot, or at least has an opportunity to do that at the end. Obviously, Russ getting the ball poked out from underneath him late when they had a chance to kind of put them in position to take it there. But I mean, just talking like exactly you said, a gritty team, a gritty OKC team. I mean, I see a lot of Memphis grit and grind kind of type qualities in there. And, I mean, this is a team that was left for dead. A year ago we had Paul George and Russell Westbrook on this team. And you fast forward 12. I mean, obviously a little bit more 12 months later with a global pandemic going on and the reset and restart. But, you hit the reset button. You've got a bevy of first-round picks in return for those players. Yeah, Chris Paul's left for dead on this team, and here he is against the team that traded him, taking them to a Game 7. I mean, who would have seen this? I mean, it's phenomenal what they're getting out of some of these guys. I mean, this is all being done without Steven Adams doing much of anything, on the OKC side. Terrence Ferguson helps, defensively getting him back. Darius Bazley's a young guy that's added in some production off the bench and stuff too. And I mean, Schroeder is just phenomenal. The job that Billy Donovan's done is just, I mean, he's well deserving of the praise and acumen, and it's just amazing. So who do you got Game 7?
I do have Houston winning in Game 7, and I just wanted to backtrack on the Billy Donovan because you brought up that point. I think anyone who said that he couldn't coach in the NBA, that is dead. I mean, seeing what he's done with these guys, like you already said, so I'm not going to keep beating that one, but he's done phenomenal, and he can coach. But I have Houston winning. I think for me, I would want Houston to win because I would love to see that Houston-LA, the Lakers matchup with LeBron, AD, Westbrook, Harden. But the Thunder don't want to go away. And if the game is close, I think the Thunder are going to pull it out. But if they're pulling away, if it's a blowout, I'd see Houston taking it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I was going to do it too. And I mean, on paper, obviously Houston shouldn't be in this position. No. I think a lot of it is but with that being said, I mean, it's just showing how much OKC is playing above their means and expectations that, they're at where they're at. But I do expect Houston as well to come through. One thing on Houston, despite, kind of the ups and downs in this series, I just wanted to talk about, I mean, too, so obviously they scrapped the whole idea of the center. They've gone down with basically, a combination of 5 wings, 5 guards. Out of the entire NBA playoff bubble down there in Orlando, the number one player in defensive plus minus is their starting center, who's actually a guard wing, Robert Covington. I mean, at 4.4. I mean, it just the type of job he's doing collectively, PJ Tucker's doing in the post. They are out playing and, I mean, really, really defining basketball almost in a way that Golden State did. Now, granted, it'll be all for naught if they don't win this Game 7. I mean, we can throw that out the window, but so far so good. The Daryl Morey thing is panning out. So we'll see, but I do too like the Rockets in Game 7. So we'll obviously listeners at that point will know the result, but that's
last thing on this series. If Houston goes down, how much does this hurt Russell Westbrook's legacy? Because I mean, he got traded here, and now they're losing in the first round. He's making the mistakes.
Well, I mean, I think he's going to have that chip on his shoulder. Durant left him obviously for a situation that was guaranteed titles and going to an already NBA champion in Golden State at the time. But Russ has got that chip on his shoulder. He's got to prove. I'm going to give Russ a little bit of a pass here. What I think it does is we've heard some turmoil or rumors of turmoil in recent months with, this might be the last hurrah for Mike D'Antoni. There's been rumors he's been on the chopping block. I think his contract's coming up here soon. He's what, 67,
Yep.
something like that. I think that we might see a whole lot. He's actually pushing 70. So he's 69, but he's he's obviously his offenses in Phoenix and work with USA Basketball. I mean, there's no question the guy can coach, but how many more times is Daryl Morey going to run it back with shooters and Harden and hope for the best? I mean, they've had an array of different opportunities. I mean, this is Houston's year. Let's be honest, where you don't have to play Golden State. They've gone to the West Finals and semifinals. They pushed Golden State even when they had the opportunity to go against Golden State at full strength to the brink and obviously fell short. But this is their time to shine. If they don't come out of this Game 7, there's going to be somehow, some way, there's going to be wholesale changes with all those one and done contracts they have, the Jeff Greens, the Daniel Houses, and I mean, Houston. This is a must win for Houston and a lot of guys' jobs.
Yeah,
down there
I
in
agree.
Texas.
I think if Houston loses, the only person who's safe on that team is James Harden, and nobody else is safe, from management to players. That's just me. Let's get into the next this series. Jazz and Nuggets tied 3-3. Game 7 is today as we're recording, so we're gonna know the viewers are gonna know the results after. But this has probably been my favorite series due to the fact that people are actually seeing how good Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray are. What do you see in when you're watching these games? Because I think it's phenomenal.
I started to think about how these guys are producing at what they're doing. We've seen
Yes.
spurts of this in Mitchell, and once in a while you'll see it out of Murray. When he's healthy, obviously he was injured, missed a lot of time this year. But Murray only averaged like 18 points a game for the regular season too. So what he's doing, both guys are averaging over 34 a game, shooting over 55% for three. I started to think too. I think a lot of that has to do with how each team defends. Obviously with when you got Jokic and when you've got Gobert, those are two guys that they're just going to pick and roll them to death, and you're seeing that. So in the pick and roll, they can't, obviously those big guys can't move their feet. They're sliding back and sinking defensively, where those guys can get around the corner and they can take them to the hoop and attack, or they get that open mid range jumper or long three. These are just two basketball assassins just going at it from the guard spot. It's been a joy to watch.
You talked about the spurts with Donovan. When I watch Donovan and he's attacking the basket relentlessly and all of that, he reminds me sometimes of a 04 to 06 Dwayne Wade, the younger D Wade before that magical finals. Because every time he drives, it just reminds me of him. I don't know why. I see the younger D Wade in him, and if he could be consistent, then something else. But then you got Murray, who that man can shoot. I don't know if people knew he could shoot the way he can shoot, but he can. He's something.
Yeah. Too, and these are two guys that are with mm-hmm. Kentucky roots too, with the Louisville mm-hmm. and UK connections. They're similar, but they're also different. Obviously, Mitchell's more of a he's not a guy who's has blazing track speed, kind of like Murray does, but definitely more of a physical presence. Attacking the bucket, absorbing contact, those kinds of things. It's been a joy to watch in the series. I think they're both going to go for high numbers again, just based again how they're being played and those kinds of things. I just can't get past it. It's just really a joy to watch. But let's talk about some of the ancillary players in the series that have also been a part of it. Obviously, we're both two guys, Columbus, Ohio based, Buckeye fans. We've been, last year we saw the joke about, after Fred VanVleet had his kid, that he came back and mm-hmm. shot the world on fire from distance and everything else. Mike Conley has been killing it from three. Has come back, and since he's returned to the bubble, has been a huge factor. Just kind of, I don't know if it's just supersonic dad powers or what, but after the birth of his first child, where he briefly left the bubble in recent weeks, but that's one guy who's really stood out and helped the Jazz in a big way. And there were a lot of questions on Mike. Once he came over from Memphis, I mean, he was not performing well whatsoever. Was not shooting the ball pretty well. Wasn't the Mike Conley of Memphis, but what are you seeing out of Conley that's really added an extra wrinkle to the
With
Jazz
Mike,
here?
definitely leadership. I mean, this guy, he's been in some big games. I mean, just like we talked about from Columbus, Ohio, making it all the way to the national title game, and with Memphis, when him and Debo, Mark and Saul, when they were like at full Memphis, like they always were a second round to fringe Western Conference championship team almost every year when they were all healthy. So this guy's been through all of these games, and I just feel like having him there and that presence and that cool Joe type factor, like we're gonna be all right. It's helped the team a lot. And yeah, this dad thing is, I think it's real. I do now. It's 2 years in a row. So I don't know who the next person's gonna have a kid and then come back and shoot the lights out. But I do think that him coming back, seeing his newborn child fully healthy, and him being here, not having to worry about that, has lifted a weight off his shoulders, and he's just been able to play phenomenally. And
Well, if you're right, and there's something to these dad powers thing, there's going to be about 400 NBA quarantine babies born about 9 months from now. So I'm just excited for the brand of basketball we're going to see come January and February. This is what we're seeing now. Two dudes dropping 50, shooting over 55% from three. That's while those aren't guys who've necessarily had babies. They've been facilitated, and particularly on the Jazz end. Some of that scoring has been facilitated by a Mike Conley being able to drive, drive some traffic away and open up lanes and stuff for Donovan to attack. But so again, people listening to this in a couple of days here, they'll know the result already. But who do you got, Nuggets or Jazz in Game 7?
I have Denver.
I have Denver as well. I mean, just for me, the depth. When I look at the two rosters, when I look at the two rotations, and what have you, I mean, Mitchell's almost scoring out of necessity because there are no other score. Now, granted, Conley's been great, but there's no other reliable scoring options. Like Jordan Clarkson can shoot you into a game, and Jordan Clarkson can shoot you out of a game really quick. Coming over from my beloved Cleveland Cavaliers up the road here in Ohio, he's added a different dynamic as a bucket getter and helpful. But I mean, they just don't have the depth. I mean, Joe Ingles in 30 minutes had 5 points in Game 6. Rudy Gobert, for as good as he is defensively, he's unreliable on the offensive end, and I think that's just part of the Jazz offense is they just don't use him a whole lot in rolls to the rim and things of that nature. But Donovan's almost, I mean, he's had to do these performances to even keep it close. And I mean, in the last game, obviously lost by 12, but Denver's just got so much depth, whether it's, Jeremy Grant, whether it's, Michael Porter, who's lit the world on fire in the bubble. Obviously he's had some poor games in the last couple, but they can afford to do that because they've got other guys who've stepped up to be able to help out. And, Jokic can go for 20, 10, and 6 any night too. So, I completely agree with you. I like Denver here to advance. And, I just think it's just a matter of the Jazz just don't have the body.
The last thing I want to say about the Jazz, because you brought up Rudy Gobert and his defense, I think he would benefit greatly spending an off season with Hakeem. I think
absolutely,
if he could get some offense going, that'd be the next step for the Jazz. And that was the last thing I want to say with them. Next one. Oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to hop into the Clippers, but go ahead.
Well, you got me thinking about just how and I mean, we could be wrong. Utah could advance, but on the Utah front, obviously the lack of a 4, kind of hurts. While Joe Ingles can kind of be that, but if you had somebody like a Kevin Love to help, pull some some folks out of the paint a little bit more, those kinds of things, as opposed to a Nyang or a Tony Bradley pairing alongside of him. It's one of those things where that could be something for the development. I mean, the Jazz roster needs some help, I think, long term if they're going to eventually get to a conference finals. But again, we'll see how Game 7 goes. As they say, anything can happen. So we may well be talking about Utah in the next round against the Clippers. So we'll see.
Last first round in the West was Clippers over the Dallas Mavericks. That went to 6, 4 games to 2. And even though the Clippers won, I think the biggest thing everyone was talking about was Luka and the magic this guy was producing on the court each game. The guy is only 21 years old, and not to put our ages out there, but he's a lot younger than us. And seeing what he was able to do is it was amazing. I don't think either of us had Dallas winning this series.
No,
but Dallas made it competitive.
They did. The Clippers obviously, lost the one to Luka. Had that. Actually, it should have been a 4-1 series early. Go to 6, as you said, but it's just amazing to see the kid play. I mean, he's well beyond his years in terms of court vision, and he's deceptive in his speed. I mean, he's not the fastest guy in the league, but he's just so smart with the basketball. I see a lot of similarities to, obviously LeBron on the age level, but LeBron currently, I mean, where LeBron can't, get his shoulder by guys just as fast as he used to, but that's just kind of Luka's body. That's kind of Luka's athleticism and who he is as a player. But they both, whether it's LeBron current, if I'm using that comparison of 36 LeBron now and 21-year-old Luka, is they're able to use their basketball IQ to see a play before it happens. As a play develops, they kind of know what the A, B, and C are of their actions and find that guy in the corner or find that trailer. Whether it's Porzingis or whether it's AD, coming back up the court from a half-court defensive possession and or swinging it to the weak side. I mean, they're just so good. Luka just way outperforms his roster and getting to a Game 6 against a really tough Clippers squad. Obviously, we had some interesting tussles in there with the never shy Markieff Morris, but it's just one of those things where the Clippers wing depth, really was able to clamp down the shooters for Dallas, and Dallas is going to have to address that with their roster coming up. I had a conversation with a guy the other day about Kristaps, his injury proneness. I mean, he's obviously a heck of a talent. They lost him in the series. Had some games in there of 13 rebounds in a game.
I agree.
You just worry about how a guy like that can hold up, Mark.
When he went down, that's when I was like, Dallas has no more shots. Like, this is it. And he's injury prone, and he's a really good player. And I really feel like him and Luka could be a really good tag team going forward. But he's not reliable. It's like every year or every other year he's hurt. And I won't harp too much on Dallas because you already talked about they need some shooters, and shooters are hard to come by in the offseason because the good teams swoop them up. So they got to be quick to find any shooter who's on the free agent market this year, which I don't even know when the free agency starts after the bubble.
They keep bumping it back and everything else. So we'll see. I think it's supposed to be sometime in sometime maybe in late October, early November. I could just be making this up. But real quick before we just kind of
Columbus guy,
the Clippers. Trey Burke, obviously a Columbus kid, Northland, right? Yep, Northland High School. Obviously, you've watched him since high school and stuff too. I mean, you talk about another guy who was
he was.
He was cut a couple times. I mean, wasn't he on the Sixers earlier this year? And they cut him. I mean, heck, can you imagine if Sixers had him coming off the bench? I mean, he had a heck of a bubble performance, and another guy that arguably was bound for heading out of the league and really proved himself and probably played himself into another 2 or 3 year contract at
Yeah,
least
with Trey
with some of
too,
his
it's like
performances here. I mean,
some
what'd
sort
you
of
think about
Columbus
Trey?
pride because, like you said, I mean, I went to Gahan and he went to Northland, so we always saw him in the district finals with him and Jared, and then him taking it to us, and then seeing him do what he did at Michigan, and then now seeing him bounce back because the league almost wrote him off, and then seeing what he did in Dallas. You're right. If Philadelphia would have had him coming off the bench, I don't think it would have changed their series, but it definitely would have provided some more firepower.
It would have helped absolutely. With the Clippers, so obviously taking series 4-2, there it really wasn't once Kristaps came down, they could kind of just be, I guess, be reassured in the fact that, like, yeah, I mean, there's no way Dallas can overcome us, even if we're out shooting, each other here, and it's 130 to 128 every game. I mean, the Clippers knew they had the firepower to keep up. I do, looking ahead to their series. I do worry about a little bit about their front court depth, whoever they play, whether it's the Jazz or Nuggets, but. Some great performances in there from Kawhi once again. Let's touch on playoff Paul. He had mentioned some mental. He mentioned some mental struggles with the bubble, and I mean some of these guys have been in there since June or so. I mean, I can completely understand. Just your head not being right in the game, and obviously with everything going on in the world too. That's a lot to weigh you down. And I know there's events and scheduled stuff, and there's foam parties and DJs and everything else. But I mean, there is something to be said about the isolation piece. But he bounced back a little bit there in that final game there. But what do you see out of Paul? Is he forcing the issue too much? Is he getting away? I mean, obviously shooting a lot of 3-pointers. I think one of the games in the series he went 1 of 8 from distance. I mean, to me, that's a lot of just kind of, which is attacking the bucket, the mid-range game. He can shoot from distance, but it's almost like he's forcing the issue a little bit, right?
And with Paul George, I'm gonna say just 2 things. One, with the mental health. I mean, both of us believe in mental health, so I sympathize with that. I mean, I do believe that that's had a strain on all of the players, not just him, but with him. Ever since that press conference where he called himself Playoff P, it's just not worked for me because since then
you got to live up to it if you're going to give yourself, if you're going to call yourself Playoff P. If you're going to be Mania Martin, you got to live up to it. And
I honestly think that's the reason he's forcing the issue, because now everyone has that notion in their head, like, dude, you don't perform in the playoffs, and normal human instinct is to prove people wrong. And I think that has been his issue. And then he talked about like talking to his teammates and calming down and all that. Then he started to perform well. I just feel like the guy gets in his own way so much. And it's crazy to think that from where he started in Indiana, when that team took the Heatles to the Western Conference Finals, I think they went to Game 7. I mean, the Eastern Conference Finals, I'm sorry. And they went to Game 7, and we're just like, oh, this guy, Paul George, he's the next one up. And then from that to OKC to now the Clippers, it's just like, I still think he's a great player, but I just need to see him relax.
I think with the Clippers, obviously their success is going to hinge on what they get out of Paul is basically a 1B to Kawhi's 1A.
Yes.
Where he still has room to grow in terms of his stardom. Obviously, he's a megastar. He's a defensive savant, always has been. Your Kawhis, your Lukas, your LeBrons, your tier 1 guys. They feel out the game before they just go attack. And I would say too, back to your comments about Russell. Russell and Paul, I think both are sometimes they're too aggressive and they force the issue. They force up some bad shots versus your Lukas, your LeBrons, your Kawhis. Those guys just kind of let the game come to them, and they step on the gas pedal when it's time to score, or they let off the gas pedal and let someone else drive the van as they feed and set up those around them with great assists and hockey assists to keep the offense flowing. I think that's going to be the next stage for Paul. We'll see how that transitions into the next series. Obviously, we can't preview that one a whole lot since we don't know the Game 7 winner.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, playoff Paul's got some ways to go to live up to that nickname. So the next three series were all kind of duds. Let's transition quick to Milwaukee's already
Yeah.
started their series with the Heat. We'll touch base on, but Magic Bucks. For the Magic, I mean, let's be honest. They just kind of ran out of players quick. They had a lot of injuries. Obviously no Mo Bamba. Vucevic had some monster games in there, but I mean, it was basically just kind of Vucevic or nothing. And then just an easy 4-1 roll outside of that, almost kind of fluke game from the Bucks where they lost, like the Lakers did in their first contest. So, Martin, thoughts on the Bucks in that series, thoughts on the Magic and where the Magic go from here?
Right. Yeah, and like you already said, with these first round Eastern Conference ones, they were pretty duds, so we're not going to spend too much time at them at all. With Milwaukee, though, they had the sloppy game one, and then they won the four straight. I do think Milwaukee sometimes show some vulnerability. If Giannis isn't getting to the hole and their shooters aren't making shots, they're not the top team that they can be. Orlando, it's hard because it's like I don't know which player or coach can come there and propel them to like a 4 or 5 seed in the East and then maybe get them to like a fringe Eastern Conference title contention. But I don't know. I don't know what they need. Like, I don't know where they can find their needs in free agency or trades.
I mean, I think they've got a lot of. If you're the Magic, they've got a lot of guys that are kind of, let's be honest, kind of fringe NBA players. Again, some of their guys, I love what I saw out of Wes Iwundu. Mo Bamba, if he can stay healthy. I mean, that's the future of the Magic is continuing to develop those guys, continuing to get them around guys who can help with some of their skill development. They can help Mo Bamba with some low post stuff like that. Those kinds of things. Obviously, they've been hurting for a real strong point guard, for a while. Obviously, took a flyer on Markelle Fultz, and I mean, Markelle for what he was, I mean, was really did well. But I mean, if this is all he is, he's a backup point guard in this league. I mean, he's a super fast point guard. He's got some hands in the passing lanes defensively, but outside of Vucevic, they just don't have a lot of talent. I do like Steve Clifford as a coach. He's always going to have a team that's in the top 10 defensively and defensive net rating and everything else. And I think the Magic were again this year, a lot of defensive categories in the top 10, and that's what propelled them into the playoffs ultimately. But they just need talent. I mean, they really do. Whether that's free agency, whether that's lucking out in the draft here or there, and do you move on from an Aaron Gordon? That's the name I also missed on the list of guys that were out for them. So it looked worse than it probably was for the Magic. Losing all those guys, but they need some talent. They need some guards and some combo guards outside of DJ Augustine, and need to just continue to develop towards the future.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really have nothing much to add on them. They got some work to do, and then we're just going into these 4-0s.
All right,
we're just gonna.
So Pacers dropped. Were dropped in 4 games to Miami.
Yep.
What did you see out of that series?
Quick things. T.J. Warren, who was technically the second MVP of the bubble outside of Dame, he got put on cuffs by Mr. Jimmy Butler. Miami.
A little chirping before this series started, back and forth.
Oh, yeah, and Jimmy's not the one to chirp with. I'm just going to say, because he will be in your face. I just think the Heat, they're dangerous. Like, they are very, very good. They're very tough. They're well coached. They have everything from top to bottom. Their organization is really good. So that is a team if I was a player, I'd be trying to avoid in the playoffs because they can knock any of these Eastern Conference teams out. Victor wasn't 100% on Indiana's side. I don't think him being 100% would have changed the outcome at all. And with Indiana getting rid of their coach, I don't know where they go from there. Maybe if D'Antoni is free at the end of tomorrow night, they might hire him. But that's really
Yeah.
all I've got for that series.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Oladipo originally wasn't going to play. I think somebody had whether it was Twitter or a pundit on TV had said something about somehow I think in his contract if he refused to play, which originally he was going to do, he'd be out like $3 million. And surprise, he magically played. But the level of Victor Oladipo that we got was not the level of Victor Oladipo we're accustomed to, who could just absolutely take over a game. And again, that really solidified that Paul George trade to OKC. Victor wasn't bad for OKC, but I mean he just lit the world on fire when it came to Pacers. But obviously after that injury, just a little slow to come back. And even with the added time off, just really wasn't himself. The Pacers also sorely missed to contend with Bam, a big physical body, and
Yep.
and Sabonis. It's one of those things that obviously that was really felt, I think, in the paint, contending with Bam and contending with Olynyk on the Heat. But yeah, I mean the Heat's depth there's just so much. Malcolm Brogdon is in lieu of some of the guard responsibilities of Oladipo. What a great pickup for the Pacers this year. Really played well in the bubble. Great facilitator, great decision maker. Really surprised Milwaukee couldn't find a way to retain him.
Yeah.
So, but yep, that's all I have to say. I think that was a little too quick on the firing of the Pacers head coach Nate McMillan, but
agreed.
Nate will coach again in this league somewhere. So I mean, obviously, our next series also fired their coach, parting ways with Brett Brown as we go to Boston, Philly. But that could be a potential spot for Nate McMillan too. So let's talk about the Celtics and the downward spiraling Sixers real quick before we wrap up with Brooklyn and the Raptors.
I think the biggest thing with Boston and Philly that we had on our notes about Philly being the mismatched island of toys. I feel like Boston's the complete opposite. They're the toys that all fit.
They're the Swiss Army. Yeah, they're the Swiss Army knife.
So and Boston's just been, as Joel Embiid said, they've been beating Philly down in the playoffs anytime they meet. So, but this 4-1 to Philly's, I guess, credit. I don't know if I want to say credit. They didn't have Ben Simmons because he was out. But
I'm not giving Philly any credit because they signed Al Horford to a 4-year, $109 million contract. And from these very same Celtics, and the result was still the same. Now, granted, yes, so no Ben Simmons, but I am not giving him a pass on signing in this day and age where touches are down something like % over the last 5 years for interior players. Shout out Kevin Love, the big Barstool podcast I listened to earlier for that stat. But it's just amazing that the Sixers just couldn't find a way to. They had a couple games that were close, but they're really gonna have to figure some things out. Obviously firing Brett Brown. I mean, you just can't stick Joel Embiid in the corner when he's 7'1", 7'2", as big a body as he is. Arguably, has all the physical tools to be a 28 and 15 guy or 28 and 12 guy at the very least. You can't just send that guy out to the corner. They obviously put a lot of effort into and constructing this roster around trying to put players around Simmons and Embiid, but throwing Al Horford in there, throwing in Tobias Harris on a max deal. And Tobias isn't a bad player, but he's not a max player. And then you're handcuffed financially. They lost TJ McConnell, who really struggled on the Pacers from that last series we just were discussing too. I mean, that was a guy who came in and brought some levels of stuff to the offense. And then, they've got a lot of work to do, Martin.
Agreed. I think the biggest thing with the max player and the contract, they should have kept Jimmy and let Tobias go. That's just me.
And yes, there's also the Jimmy aspect there too. So, and who knows behind the scenes? I mean, Jimmy's happy in Miami. He loves the Heat culture. He's a Heat guy. I think he's gonna be there for a long time after bouncing around from Chicago to Philly to Milwaukee for like 2 games before he absolutely ripped away what's left of the soul Andrew Wiggins had. Um, Miami's his home, so there's probably some stuff behind the scenes that he could have forced his way. I don't know, but you've got to find a way to make Jimmy happy and keep him around. I mean, because that was the difference. I mean, they were a game away from beating the eventual champions Raptors last year on that crazy Game 7
Right.
shot by Kawhi. But to Boston's credit, Boston did what Boston does is they locked in defensively. They locked in defensively in the half court, and Boston just or Philadelphia really just struggled to find quality shots and to really consistently feed Embiid. But again, it hurts not having Simmons to stretch the floor with his passing and his vision, and defensively too. I mean, that's arguably a tier 1 or tier 2 defender in the league in terms of talent. So that was that series. The last of the first round, Brooklyn and Toronto.
Yep. The Raptors, man. I just think people who were just casually watching last year, they're just like, oh, Kawhi is the reason they won the title, which he was, but that team is really good, and they are put together very well. And anyone who slept on the Raptors, you need to wake up. Pascal Siakam's actually probably one of my favorite players in the NBA right now. Hopefully,
love watching him play.
Hopefully, he can start getting some more recognition from the mainstream media. And then I think the biggest thing for Brooklyn is, I mean, getting swept, that sucks. But next year, I don't think they're going to get swept if their two big dogs come fully healthy.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest with Brooklyn. No Kyrie, no Kevin Durant, obviously, and DeAndre Jordan didn't travel with the team down to Orlando. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Brooklyn wasn't a complete team by any means, nor were they a complete failure in this bubble. I mean, they were competitive, but I mean, this basically was kind of a glorified summer league stint for some of their younger players.
Yes.
Obviously they had Caris LeVert to go back to being kind of alpha, and they're going to have to figure out how to incorporate Caris in there. That's a guy who likes to have the ball in his hands to create, to score. Love what I saw out of Luwawu Cabarrot. He really had some really good games in there. Just really brought in some high energy, a longer wing at 6'7". But again, it was really a glorified kind of summer league stint for some of those guys, for your Jared Allens as well. But no, we all know it was never about this year with the Brooklyn Nets. It's always about the future since KD and Kyrie decided to team up and go there. And if those guys can stay healthy, they'll certainly have something to say about how the East proceeds and how other teams scheme to defend those guys. I mean, you're talking about two of the most premier scorers the NBA has to offer who were off the court this year. So with that said, again, not a lot to say about the series. Toronto, like you said, people are sleeping on Toronto as your defending champs here, and they've retooled, even losing Kawhi, and that leads us into that's the conclusion of the first round here. So. Mm-hmm. Let's continue on with the Raptors. So obviously they're arguably their worst game they played in. It is the worst game they played in the bubble so far in terms of playoffs, but fell in game 1 of the second round to Boston by a final 112-94. I didn't watch the full game, but I watched the beginning of it. Really struggled to put the ball in the basket. I think Serge Ibaka had 8 of their first 13 points coming off the bench. I mean, they just really struggled against Boston defensively, and that was kind of the theme. Once Boston was able to lock in their half-court defense, I mean, Toronto, that prides itself on getting up and down the floor, really struggled. But right off the gate, Fred VanVleet wasn't really hitting shots. Siakam got in foul trouble early in game 1. 2 fouls in, and he picked up a third on a very ticky-tack foul. But I mean, you got to pull him out of there. You know what? And he was kind of walking on eggshells the rest of the game, knowing he was in foul trouble. And I mean, that's your prime workhorse here. He finished the game with only 13 points on 5 of 16 shooting. Add in at the start in that first quarter, I think I saw 3 out of 4 drives by Kyle Lowry, and Kyle Lowry's a foul drawing guy who can bring you into a game and into the lead, and he's a guy who can bring you out of the game when they aren't calling plays and he's kind of flailing and turning the ball over. Kind of a poor man's James Harden dynamic, and the fact that that guy hunts fouls. There were out of all those possessions I watched, there were like 3 out of 4 or 3 out of 5 possessions where there were no calls, and Boston's defense settled in, and they really had a huge game. And Jason Tatum, I think all 21 of his points came outside of the first quarter. Maybe sans a bucket or two. I don't think he scored till late in the first if he did score, but a whole lot to jump out as early as they did on the Raptors. Martin, what'd you see?
I think game one, I think Boston just asserted dominance. I don't expect that type of game from Toronto going forward. I think this is a series that can definitely go the distance, 7 games. I feel like these two teams can be very evenly matched. It's just Boston got the jump on them this one game. I feel like Toronto's going to bounce back and win game two. By the time the viewers listen to this, I could be completely wrong, and then they get swept. Who knows? But I do think all the things you said, Nurse's got to know when to take his people out with the foul troubles, and Kyle Lowry driving, getting the fouls. The poor man's James Harden. That was pretty funny. But I do like Boston. I've always liked Boston, the team that they've had. I mean, I really didn't like them when they were playing Cleveland, when Cleveland was in the finals with LeBron and them, because I was like, oh, we're in game 7. They might lose. But this young team, if they can just keep Jalen and Jason together and Kimba, I do feel like there's titles in this team's future. I don't know about this year, but in the future. And with Toronto, don't write them off. They're not gonna go down. They're gonna go down swinging if they even go down in this series at all.
Yeah, Toronto's not gonna lay down by any means. And I don't think that every team's due for a bad game.
Yep.
Here and there too. I mean, rarely does somebody go unscathed all the way.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's one thing, whether it's this series in terms of Boston, whether it's this series or it's the next series against the Bucks or Heat, Boston. The one thing that I think Boston's going to struggle with, or getting into a series or a stretch of games where they're going to struggle with, particularly when you get into game 3, 4, and 5, is their depth. Obviously Tatum, Walker, Smart, Brown, and Tice do really well. And I mean, let's talk about the job that Daniel. He can step out and occasionally pop a 3. He's a phenomenal role man. Defensively, he is so good. Shout out Germany, Daniel Tice. But in terms of their bench, I mean, you're still relying on, they use Robert Williams a lot, and that's a defensive shot blocker and not near as much mobile as Daniel Tice is. But they played him a lot of minutes in game 1. I expect that to continue. But if your bench depth is relying on Brad Wanamaker, Semi Ojeleye, and Romeo Langford, like at a certain point, you just, I mean, you're going to hit a wall, right? I mean, your guys are going to be gassed. I mean, there's only so much. As good as Tatum, Brown, and Walker are, and there's some questions to be had about Walker's knee still holding up. He had some issues here in the bubble. I mean, at a certain point, you're going to go up against the Heat, and they're just continuously throwing the Jay Crowders. I mean, those extended wings, the Jay Crowders, the Andre Iguodala's, or if it's Milwaukee, throwing out Giannis, and you're chasing around Kyle Korver on screens. I mean, good luck, Brad Wanamaker, chasing Kyle Korver around on screens, and when they do those double pin downs to get him wide open. I mean, whichever team they face, if they were to advance, and again, they don't have to. I mean, this could come to play in this Toronto series too. I mean, Toronto's got depth with Hollis Jefferson and Boucher and Powell, and Davis has been a great pickup this year. That's my one fear for Boston. As good as they played in game 1, I really question the depth. I do.
Right. And you brought up Miami and Milwaukee, which is the other series that's currently in their second round, and Miami's up 1-0, and that game just happened yesterday. And Jimmy Jimmy now buckets, getting a career playoff high of 40 points. And even though the box score looked a little bit closer, I never felt like Milwaukee was in the game. I felt like Miami had a
No.
pretty strong control over it. And with Giannis's fourth quarter, I think he only had 1 point in the fourth quarter, if I do believe, 18 total. And he was a defensive player of the year, and he never switched to guard Jimmy, which I was completely confused about. How are you the best defensive player in the league, and you're letting some guy light your team up, and you don't want to guard him?
Yeah, he took a lot of heat today in the press. There was a reporter who asked him about, don't isn't that an innate tendency of an elite defender to, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, somebody didn't ask that, but to want to step up or go, I think the phrase was go to your coach and ask to be put on
Yep.
him. And he said, why would you ask me that? And of course, an array of former great defenders, and some NBA pundits come out and said, your guys who have been defensive player of the year, your Tony Allens, your Pat Beverly. I mean, Pat Beverly hasn't won it, but your guys who are just in and out, grind it out every position. I don't care if the guy's got 6 inches on me in terms of height and wingspan. Like, I want that matchup. I mean, that's got to be a little concerning coming from your top guy and an MVP candidate, right? Especially in a series where they're going to need him to lock down on the Heat's best guy.
Yeah, and I don't want to really harp on Giannis like that because he's only 25 and he's already won an MVP, Most Improved Defensive Player of the Year, may win MVP again. But if they go down to the Heat because of him being put on lockdown, it's almost reminiscent of last year with Toronto. I mean, once they had the defensive strategy on him, and then Milwaukee couldn't do anything. And I'm almost seeing that with the Heat, with Jimmy and that crew. Is just like I feel like Giannis needs to get out of this round for his, as we always say in basketball, his legacy. But the Heat aren't going to go away. This is another series where I either see Milwaukee winning in 7 or Miami winning in 6.
Yeah, I think it's going to go to the distance. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to take this series in 5. I really don't. I mean, both teams have way too much talent. They'll make mid-series adjustments. They'll figure it out. I mean, I think with as much heat today as I can almost guarantee that Giannis has gotten, that I think we're going to see him pick up Jimmy on some possessions in the next game. I mean, he's one of those guys that he's not just going to let that ride. But the Heat. Again, I mean, they've kind of been the story of the year that, watch out for the Heat, watch out for the Heat. Well, finally we are pushed to shove against the number 1 seed in the East. We mentioned the arsenal of wings they have, Butler, Crowder. You got Adebayo who can keep up footwork wise with some guys. They're starting center with some guys on the wing. Iguodala. I mean, you've got some guards out there too that are can hold their own somewhat. Although that's somewhat of a weakness, defensively. But Tyler Hero only had 11 points last night. Kind of struggled from 3-point, but had some big buckets down the stretch. I mean, that's a guy who from night to night can easily shoot you well into a lead. But Milwaukee, yes, really struggled. No Eric Bledsoe last night. Giannis finished with 18 and 37 minutes and assists, just shy of a triple double. But it really became apparent down the stretch. I mean, Miami would sink on Giannis defensively, basically say, "You're going to shoot, and we're either going to lose by you making buckets, or we're going to win by this strategy." So they really can kind of took away his driving lanes in the paint, and from a foul standpoint too, he picked up a couple quick fouls that he kind of was walking on eggshells, afraid to attack the bucket maybe as hard as he normally did. Middleton finished with 28, but down the stretch, I think the one thing for Milwaukee, if there's one for Boston in terms of depth of like, man, I just wonder, like, you're the expected team to win this series. Well, let me not say that too soon. I still expect Toronto, I think, to win their series with Boston somehow. But if you're Milwaukee, what's going to hurt is, as good as Chris Middleton is, and this has been the story from long ago, is he an isolation bucket getter? So if you take Giannis out of the fold by a guy who normally gets and makes his living on attacking the bucket in transition, attacking the bucket, just beating his defender off of pick and rolls, and just using that length and stuff to his advantage. I mean, Chris isn't necessarily a guy that you can just throw him the ball on the wing and he's going to go get it and get it consistently. And then you look up and down that roster. I mean, there's some great shooters on there. Kyle Korver, Wes Matthews. Brooke Lopez had a heck of a game last night. This will be a few nights removed when people listen to this again, but that's going to be what Giannis's ability to either adapt and shoot and help open up some driving lanes, or Middleton's ability to kind of truly be that second banana and take some of the scoring pressure off, especially down the stretch. I mean, you have to have guys that when the game slows down and you're eating 16 seconds out of a 24-second shot clock, that you can say, you know what, this is 7 times out of 10, this is going to be a bucket. And I just don't know that Milwaukee's got a whole lot of those guys versus Miami. There's so many individual shot creators. I mean, Dragic has had a heck of a bubble. People kind of wrote him off. He spent a lot of time as a sixth man. He's starting again now. I mean, they've got so many guys. Duncan Robinson can drop 8 threes on you a game like that. I mean, Tyler Hero, while he hasn't done that, is obviously a heck of a shooter. And Kendrick Nunn, who arguably is your, could well be in contention for, a number 2 or number 3 spot rookie of the year behind John Morant. They didn't really need a whole lot of him last night, just 16 minutes. But these are 2 great Eastern Conference series, Martin. I'm really looking forward to it. This is the playoff basketball we've been crossing our fingers and hoping we could get to if it was done safely without having to stop the season.
And just to go back on your point about Chris Middleton, I think for us, I guess we're the millennials, he reminds me the most. I don't think he can get an ISO shot. He reminds me of this generation's Rip Hamilton. I just feel like he can get off some screens. He's a great mid-range shooter. He can shoot from deep too, but Rip wasn't really an ISO guy, and that's who I see Chris with. And I just wanted to answer that. And then with the West, I mean, we can't even talk about the second rounds because we have game 7s going on. So we're definitely going to have to recap those game 7s when they happen and have a true preview of the West semis.
I mean, to some extent, we can project a little bit. And we can only speak really to the Lakers and Clippers because, again, like you said, we don't know the Game 7 winner in each of their series. But if you're the Lakers playing Houston or OKC, you got to be almost salivating if you're the Lakers and you've got JaVale McGee, you've got Dwight Howard, you've got Anthony Davis, and you've got LeBron, guys that just, whether you're rim runners and rolling, picking and rolling to the rim, or you're whatever. I mean, as good as we praised Covington, he's not going to do anything against Anthony Davis backing him down in the post. I mean, you got to be salivating looking at that Houston matchup. I mean, even though OKC's got Steven Adams and Nerlens Noel and a little bit more size down there. I mean, that's almost got to be the matchup you kind of prefer, right?
Right. If it does go Houston's way and they get LA, I just with the greatness of Harden and Westbrook, I could see them getting a game 2 max, but I feel like that's going to be a pretty easy series for LA. I mean, they just have too much size, just way too much size for them. And OKC, I don't see them beating them either. And even if we go down to the Clippers potentially playing the Jazz or the Nuggets, I feel like the Nuggets may be a better matchup for the Clippers with Jokic and Jamal and all of those boys. But I just feel like with them too, the Clippers just have too much depth. Like the Nuggets have no answer for Kawhi. They have no answer for Paul George. Pat Beverly's a dog. And I just feel like that collision course that we've been wanting with the Clippers and the Lakers it's going to happen. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe someone ends that. I don't know. That's what we're projecting.
That's the beauty of playoff basketball is we can project as much as we want and think things are going to play out how they are. But I do have some concerns here if I'm the Clippers. I mean, you look at whether it's the Jazz or whether it's the Nuggets. I mean, again, I think Nuggets have a little bit more depth in a 7-game series. But whether it's either of those teams, you've got 2 really big front court guys that you didn't have to, whether it ends up being Jokic or it ends up being Gobert, that you didn't have to contend with in that Maverick series. I mean, Boban can bring some reliable minutes, but it's Boban. And it's just a different game when you're battling Porzingis, who is a guy is got more of a face up game versus a rim runner and playmaker. I mean, is like you having a Gobert and a Jokic. And even that too. I mean, I'd like to think Paul Millsap isn't completely washed up. I might be the last guy with real estate on or within the city limits of Paul Millsap city here, but that's still a stretch four you have to contend with somewhat. But the front court depth has always been a worry. They didn't use Noah a lot. I can't remember if he's injured, not to tell you the truth, but there probably is a reason why they didn't play him. But I doubt I just have some doubts, I guess, about their front court depth and how they contend against that. But I do like them to win their series against whoever it is, based on that wing depth. And they're a team that shoots a lot of threes, that scores a lot, and just depending on who it is, they might have some troubles attacking the bucket with Paul George and Kawhi, against a big like a Gobert or Jokic.
You're right. We're just gonna have to wait and see on that when those opponents get decided. And nearing the end of our first episode together, the last thing I just want to talk real quickly about is the MVP. Right now, LeBron and Greek Freak are probably the top two on who are going to get. I think the third person was James Harden, and I don't think he's going to win. But when you think about the MVP this year, who do you lean towards, and just real quickly, why?
Well, I mean, if you look at the stats, they're both pretty similar here on Giannis and LeBron. Obviously we've got Ohio ties, and I mean, I'll be honest, my basketball fandom and love for the game started with watching LeBron come into the league in that first game in Sacramento. And while I have since kind of stuck, I mean, I follow LeBron now as I did with the Heat, but I mean, I stuck with the team and I'm a Cavs fan, but I mean, I would lean towards a personal preference. I'd love to see LeBron, just after so many years of I just can't believe how, when it's all said and done, I mean, it's likely, if he doesn't win it this year, it's likely LeBron finishes his career with only 4 most valuable players. Like, it's almost like the award has become LeBron's LeBron, but who else had a really good year? And I feel like that's something that, if you're a media member with a vote, whether you're, somebody of influence to a national media person who maybe doesn't have a vote and playing up other candidates, I feel like that's been the narrative, since LeBron won that last MVP in Miami. It's one of those things where I think he's been left out of the conversation, the serious conversation. It's been given to the Derrick Roses, and not that he didn't have a phenomenal year, but the Giannis's, what have you. I just feel like when it's all said and done, I mean, we all know there hasn't been a better player on this planet than LeBron James. I love the argument from The Ringer when they say that if the aliens were to come down to Earth and you needed to have 5 of one player, who would it be? We'd all pick LeBron, any active player. We'd all pick LeBron James in a heartbeat. We would. If we wanted a captain for all 5 teams, the aliens are coming down and the fate of the Earth is on the line, we want LeBron James as the captain of that team. He's the most valuable player. I'm not going to dance on the Michael Jordan stuff. They're each their own people, but that would be my personal preference. But with that said, I think it's Giannis's. I'll be honest. I think Giannis is gonna win the award. They announced, and I don't know if they're gonna announce it by the time this airs or not, but Giannis was announced as the defensive player of the year. Obviously, that has a high wearing on people's mind, and also in charge of a number 1 seed as well too. So I mean, it's gonna be close. I hope on a personal level, I hope I'm wrong, but I think Giannis has earned it this year over LeBron with a slight edge.
I think Giannis is going to win everything that I was going to say you've said. But my only thing, since we brought up the Michael thing, I think LeBron is in that same situation that Michael was in.
We call that rarefied air, I think.
So it's like those two are the only 2 players, I think, in history who could have won MVP every year that they've been in, but they just can't do it because, I mean, the media narrates the stories, and then that's how it goes. But I would like to see either one. LeBron's from Ohio, so that's the little thing edge. But I think Giannis is gonna take it.
Martin, we got some great game sevens ahead of us, man. I'm excited to watch, and we'll come back and do a second round recap here. I'm sure probably and preview the conference finals and eventually the NBA finals. We might be in a spot where we can go back and forth after a couple games here or there as the days are broken up in between. We'll have some more time. I appreciate you having me on, man.
I appreciate you being on. And like Evan said, we're going to be here the whole NBA playoffs. We're going to be previewing Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals, everything in between. This is my basketball guy, so you're going to be hearing a lot from us in these coming weeks and years to come. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the L7C podcast. Thank you, Evan, again for being on, and we will talk to you guys in the next round, maybe sooner. Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.